Number 1. The flanking maneuver. In conventional warfare, two armies collide head-on in a brutal test of raw strength. But a direct frontal assault is usually the most costly way to fight. It targets the enemy exactly where they are strongest. The flanking maneuver completely rejects this brutal approach. Instead of charging the enemy's front, you fix their attention forward while sending highly mobile units around their sides, their flanks, where their armor is thin, their vision is limited, and their defenses are non-existent. The absolute masterpiece of this tactic took place at the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC. The legendary Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca faced a massive Roman force of over 80,000 soldiers, one of the largest armies Rome had ever assembled. Hannibal intentionally allowed his center line to bow backward under Roman pressure, giving the Romans the illusion that they were winning. As the Romans pushed eagerly forward, focused entirely on the center, Hannibal's elite cavalry swept around both sides, closing the trap from behind. The Romans suddenly realized they were completely surrounded from all four directions. They were squeezed so tightly together they couldn't even draw their swords. By the end of the day, over 50,000 Roman legionaries lay dead. Hannibal proved to the world that superior positioning and timing will always conquer raw numbers. Tactic number 2 is the ancient world's most terrifying defensive barrier, the phalanx formation. Before the phalanx, battles were often chaotic, disorganized brawls where individual warriors fought one-on-one. The ancient Greeks, most famously the Spartans, revolutionized warfare by turning an entire army into a single machine. The phalanx was a tightly packed rectangular mass of heavy infantry known as hoplites. Soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, typically 8 to 16 ranks deep. Each soldier carried a massive round wooden and bronze shield called a hoplon. The genius of the design was overlap. A soldier's shield covered his own left side, while the right side of his body was protected by the shield of the comrade standing next to him. Behind this wall of bronze, rows of long spears, ranging from 8 feet to the massive 18-foot Macedonian sarissa, extended forward. An enemy army charging at a phalanx faced a wall of overlapping shields bristling with dozens of deadly spear points. If a soldier in the front rank fell, the man directly behind him stepped up instantly to fill the gap. For over 3 centuries, no frontal attack could pierce a well-trained Greek phalanx. It transformed ordinary citizens into an invincible wall of steel, proving that absolute unity and discipline create an unbeatable force. Tactic number 3 moves into the realm of pure psychological warfare, the feigned retreat. To pretend to flee from a battle sounds like cowardice, but in the hands of a master strategist, it is one of the deadliest traps ever devised. Human psychology dictates that when an enemy sees you running away, their discipline collapses. Overconfidence, greed, and the thrill of victory take over. No one mastered this psychological trap quite like Genghis Khan and his Mongol horse archers. During an engagement, Mongol warriors would attack briefly, then intentionally fake panic, turn their horses around, and ride away in apparent chaos and defeat. The opposing army, believing they had won an easy victory, would break their formations and rush forward in wild pursuit to loot the bodies and execute the survivors. But the Mongols weren't panicking. They were deliberately leading the scattered enemy into a pre-selected ambush zone miles away. Once the pursuers were strung out, exhausted, and hopelessly disorganized, hidden Mongol units waiting on the flanks would spring out and encircle them. The retreating forces would instantly spin their horses around and rain arrows down on the trapped pursuers. The Mongols conquered half the known world using this brilliant deception, demonstrating that the mind is often far more lethal than the sword. Tactic number 4 is not just a military strategy. It is a universal law of power: divide and conquer. When facing a coalition of multiple tribes, allies, or powerful warlords, fighting their united strength head-on is military suicide. Julius Caesar understood that power lies in unity, and therefore, victory lies in breaking that unity before a single weapon is drawn. During the Gallic Wars in the 50s BC, Julius Caesar faced dozens of fierce Celtic tribes in modern-day France. Combined, the Gauls outnumbered Rome's legions by hundreds of thousands, but the tribes were fiercely independent and prone to rivalry. Caesar systematically exploited these fault lines. He used political diplomacy, bribes, and secret promises to create distrust among tribal leaders. He aligned Rome with weaker tribes, convincing them to fight their stronger neighbors. He negotiated peace treaties with one faction while brutally wiping out another. By ensuring his enemies were constantly fighting among themselves or standing isolated, Caesar defeated each faction separately, one by one. Caesar proved that an army of 100,000 united soldiers can easily defeat 200,000 divided ones. Today, divide and conquer remains a fundamental strategy in military doctrine, international politics, and corporate business. Tactic number 5 is the ultimate maneuver of total annihilation, the pincer movement, also known as double envelopment. Imagine a scorpion using both of its powerful claws to grab a prey item simultaneously. While a standard flank attacks from one side, the pincer movement attacks both the left flank and the right flank at the exact same moment, while a central force holds the enemy pinned in place. When executed properly, the two attacking wings curve around the back of the enemy army until they meet in the middle, completely closing the ring. Once the encirclement is locked, the enemy loses all room to maneuver. Soldiers are crushed into a dense pocket where command structures collapse, panic sets in, and retreat becomes physically impossible. While Hannibal perfected this against Rome at Cannae, the pincer movement remained the ultimate goal of generals for over 2,000 years. In World War II, German blitzkrieg tactics relied heavily on massive armored pincer movements to trap entire Soviet armies at Stalingrad and Kiev. It is considered the gold standard of battlefield maneuvers, a complete trap from which there is no escape. Tactic number 6 relies on one of the simplest laws of nature and physics, the high ground advantage. In his timeless masterwork, The Art of War, the ancient Chinese general Sun Tzu wrote, "Seize the high ground, and victory is yours." Throughout history, controlling the elevated terrain, whether a hill, mountain, or ridge, has been the single greatest positional advantage. Why is high ground so effective? First, gravity works entirely in your favor. Archers firing downhill gain significantly increased range and kinetic impact, while enemies shooting upward lose power and momentum. Second, charging uphill is physically brutal. Attacking soldiers arrive at the top gasping for air, exhausted before the actual hand-to-hand combat even begins. Third, high ground provides total visibility. Defenders can track every enemy movement from miles away, making surprise attacks almost impossible. At the Battle of Hastings in 1066, King Harold's Saxon army held the top of Senlac Hill, successfully repelling repeated brutal charges from Norman cavalry and infantry for hours. The high ground transforms terrain into a silent, deadly ally. Tactic number 7 is the most violent, high-speed offensive weapon of antiquity, the shock cavalry charge. Before Alexander the Great, cavalry was mostly used for scouting, skirmishing, or chasing down retreating foot soldiers. But Alexander recognized that a concentrated, disciplined mass of heavily armored horsemen, charging at full speed, could act like a sledgehammer. At the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BC, Alexander faced the Persian king Darius III. The Persian army outnumbered Alexander's forces nearly 3-1. Instead of spreading his army thin, Alexander formed his elite companion cavalry into a sharp wedge formation. Alexander waited patiently for the Persian lines to shift. The moment a small gap opened in the Persian formation, Alexander personally led his cavalry in a thundering, full-speed charge, heading straight for King Darius himself. The sheer psychological terror of thousands of thundering hooves, lances, and unstoppable momentum panicked the Persian command. King Darius fled the field, and the massive Persian army disintegrated into chaos. Alexander proved that targeted speed and shock value can destroy an enemy long before raw numbers come into play. Tactic number 8, Saladin's concentration of force and environmental warfare. In 1187, the Crusader kingdom held Jerusalem with heavily fortified castles and armies of elite, heavily armored knights. But the legendary Muslim general Saladin understood two critical weaknesses. The Crusaders were divided internally, and their heavy armor was ill-suited for the scorching Middle Eastern heat. First, Saladin unified the divided Muslim factions from Egypt to Syria into a single, highly disciplined army. Second, instead of attacking the heavily fortified Crusader castles, Saladin maneuvered rapidly to draw them into open terrain. Saladin positioned his forces to cut off the Crusaders completely from Lake Tiberias, their only source of fresh water. As the Crusaders marched under the relentless July sun, Saladin's troops set fire to the dry desert scrub around them, filling the air with suffocating heat and smoke. Dehydrated, exhausted, and trapped inside their baking iron armor, the Crusader army collapsed under Saladin's concentrated attack. The decisive victory at Hattin led directly to the liberation of Jerusalem, proving that terrain knowledge, environmental manipulation, and unified force will always defeat raw armor and brute strength. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into world history.